What's up, YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I want to talk about Man of Steel. Specifically, why do I still love this movie, even though I think Superman 2025 is a better movie? Now, these movies, Man of Steel and Superman 2025, have been compared a lot. And this is kind of my small video to add my small input to the discussion. It's not going to be an exhaustive comparison of the two films or anything like that. It's just going to be talking about why I love both movies, but I enjoy Superman 2025 a little bit more. I won't go too heavily into that. This is going to be focused mainly on Man of Steel. And for that matter, I do want to give a spoiler warning for Man of Steel. From beginning to end, I'll be spoiling that movie extensively. And then minor spoilers for Superman 2025 and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Both of those movies, I'm going to be talking about like the vibes and kind of what Superman was like in those movies, but not necessarily spoiling any crucial plot details from those films. So yeah, minor spoilers for those two, major spoilers for Man of Steel. Let's get into this video. Okay, so I talked about in my review of Superman 2025 that I enjoyed that movie more than Man of Steel, but I really want to just set the record straight and say that I love Man of Steel. I think Man of Steel is a really cool, fun movie. I know it has issues, and I'll get into those in a second. I'll kind of address them, but I still love the movie, and this video is going to function in a lot of ways as a love letter to Man of Steel, and I'm excited to do that. I think the first thing I want to say, though, is that I do feel really bad for the main actor, Henry Cavill, who played Superman in Man of Steel. He had this movie, he had Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and he had two versions of the Justice League that he was in, and none of them quite made his character satisfying or entertaining as Superman, which is really unfortunate. Or rather, none of those movies got the character quite right. Even though I felt that he was well cast, I think Henry Cavill could have done a fantastic job as Superman. I just don't think he was given the writing or the movie or the direction needed to really see the full potential of his take on Superman, which is really unfortunate. And it's compounded and made even worse because at the end of 2022, when Black Adam came out, he had a small cameo in that movie. And then a few days later, or maybe it was a few weeks, he announced on social media, hey, I'm back. They're going to do another Man of Steel movie. It's going to be kind of a reset for the character. It'll be a lot more hopeful, a lot more happy. And we thought, yay, he'd finally get his redemption. And then the tragic news came just a few months later that actually, no, they're going to reboot the character and reboot the entire DCEU. Which I think was the smart decision, and I think in the long run it will be for the best, but it is really unfortunate for everyone who is fans of the DCEU, everyone who is fans of Man of Steel, and specifically Henry Cavill himself, who had to make kind of this announcement of, hey, I'm coming back, and then a few weeks later he says, well, actually I'm not coming back, because he did release a response video, and he's like, hey, sat down with James Gunn, told me he's going to reboot the character, and ultimately that's just showbiz. And it's really classy of him not to get angry or frustrated with it. He just kind of takes it in stride and moves on. That's great, but it is, again, really unfortunate for him, and I just want to say, sorry, Henry. That's really hard. That's really rotten situation. But let me tell you why I think Man of Steel was good. Let me tell you why I think Henry Cavill's take could have been awesome. And let me tell you why I will forever love Man of Steel despite everything that came after and all of that stuff. So let's get into that. Let's end on a kind of cathartic happiness there. Okay, so right out of the gate, I just have to say this. I loved Man of Steel because it showed overpowered Superman. He was a straight-up demigod in this movie. He moved so fast. He was super strong. He was lifting crazy weights. He was moving so fast. His flight was awesome. He was just so cool, and I loved it. I know a lot of people don't like Superman because he is so overpowered, because it's hard for them to get invested in his stories if he is just so powerful. And I think that criticism is very valid. I think that's very understandable. But for me, it's never held me back. I think it's just so cool to see a superhero who is so powerful. And I think as long as you write compelling, good characters or good stories and believable villains that he can go up against that are equal to his power, then it doesn't matter that he's so powerful. Case in point, Man of Steel. He goes up against other Kryptonians, people who move just as fast as him, who are ostensibly just as strong as he is. And how does he overcome that? And I think that's just so cool to see in a Superman movie, and I think that worked really well for Man of Steel. So I want to just start off this thing right away. I love overpowered Superman. I think that's so awesome for it. And I know what a lot of you might be thinking. Well, didn't you praise Superman 2025 for having a depowered Superman, one who was significantly weaker, whose first image that we saw of him was bleeding on the ground in the ice, weak? Yes, I did praise Superman 2025 for that, and I do think that's the right direction for Superman 2025 to go. But I think we're missing the goal of both of these movies, right? Superman 2025 is trying to set up a cinematic universe. That is its goal right from the outset. They have other superheroes involved in there. They're setting up a wider world. And so you kind of need a depowered Superman for a cinematic universe to work. Case in point, in Dawn of Justice, when Superman has to go up against a mere mortal, Batman, in the one fight that exists in that movie between Batman and Superman, which it's baffling that there's only one fight, but that's another topic for another day. The point is that's very unbelievable that this version of Superman from Man of Steel would struggle with that Batman, who's just a regular dude, right? It just doesn't make sense to me. That's why I think a depowered Superman works great for a cinematic universe, but an overpowered Superman can work great for like a trilogy of movies that are just focused on Superman and his mythos. That's where I think Man of Steel could have succeeded. Because let's be real, I don't think when Man of Steel originally was being created and produced, they had these grand ideas of creating a cinematic universe, a DC extended universe for it to function as the foundation of. No. They were seeing the success of the Dark Knight trilogy and they say, we need to do the same thing, but for Superman. There are so many similarities between Man of Steel and Batman Begins. It's uncanny, partially because they're both produced by Christopher Nolan, although Christopher Nolan even directed Batman Begins, but that's beside the point. The point is that I think 100% they meant for Man of Steel to be the beginning of a trilogy of Superman movies, not the beginning of a DCEU. And the thing that kind of threw a monkey wrench into the whole plan was the fact that Man of Steel came out in 2013. The year before, 2012, was when the Avengers came out. The heads at DC Studios were like, hey, we have our own comic cinematic universe possibilities. Let's jump right into it. And they rushed into production. You all know the downfall of the DCEU. I don't need to go into it extensively. But the long and the short of it was, I don't think Man of Steel was ever meant to be the beginning of a DCEU. And I think it works poorly as a foundation for that, precisely because it is so overpowered in its adaptation of Superman. He is just so powerful that it baffles the mind how he could struggle against mere mortals. It baffles the mind as to why he would need a Justice League to surround him if he's just more powerful than all of them, just stupidly more powerful than all of them. And that's what I want to say about that. Because I do think an overpowered Superman could work for a trilogy of Superman movies. I'll talk about what I think that trilogy could look like at the end of this video. But first, I want to move on to the next thing that I love about Man of Steel, and that is the flying sequences. It's kind of a subpart of the overpowered Superman, but I just think the flying of Man of Steel is so cool. I know it's a trite and overdone superpower on screen because so many superheroes can fly. It makes sense. It's an incredibly useful ability. I don't think it's too overpowered. It's really cool. It's really fun. But I think Man of Steel probably does it best, better than any other superhero movie. And that's really impressive. And it's another reason I love Man of Steel, you know? I'm not 100% confident that it's better than any other superhero movie, but it's definitely up there in like the top 3, top 5, because I struggle to think of any other flying character that I enjoy watching fly more than Henry Cavill's Superman, specifically in Man of Steel, but also they do a pretty good job with his flight animations in the other movies. Moving on, another thing that I love about Man of Steel is the prologue that takes place on Krypton. It is so cool to see Jor-El do this dramatic, awesome action sequence to get his son off planet, to save his son in hopes for a brighter future for him. That is just so cool. And I love seeing the dystopian world that is Krypton in its final moments. Not only is the planet, breaking apart because they have not taken good care of it, they've drilled into the planet's core and it's caused problems there, but also there's just like the corrupt government, the bureaucratic nature of it all. There's the fact that Krypton in this universe has not been able to have a natural birth. They've just done sci-fi genetic experiments to have children and stuff, which again just speaks to the dystopian nature of this world. It works so well and it compels me, and that's exactly what I want a movie to be doing. And I love this version of Krypton. It's such a cool way to start Man of Steel, and I just love it so much. Plus, not for nothing, I do think that prologue sets up future Man of Steel sequels that could have been and could have connected back to this epic prologue and could have maybe shot some additional shots to recontextualize that prologue in different ways. We'll get to that later. I want to say I love the characterization of Superman in Man of Steel specifically. I know he's insecure about being a superhero. He doesn't know if he should or shouldn't, but I think it works so well for this movie because throughout the entire film, we have seen Pa Kent tell him, hide your powers, don't use that. If people find out who and what you really are, it's going to cause so many problems for you. Keep that hidden. And that's really hard for Superman because he is such a heroic character. He wants to do good so desperately. He wants to use his powers to help people, not just sit on them when he knows he could be better. And I love that for his character. And I think it works so well. And I think the actor, Henry Cavill, brings that dichotomy out in his nature so much. He wants to follow his father's wisdom, but he also wants to be true to himself. And that's really hard. And it really is really cool that once he learns his true heritage, right? He has his conversation with Jor-El in the spaceship. He realizes, oh, I can be a symbol of hope. I can be a hero. I can help other people. And that is just so powerful and so good for his character. And so I love that journey that he goes on throughout Man of Steel. What frustrates me about the characterization of Superman in specifically Dawn of Justice, Batman v Superman, was the fact that Superman was now insecure again about being a superhero. It's like, I thought we'd handled this. Like in this movie, he learned that he was okay with being a superhero. But now in Batman v Superman, he's questioning it all over again. Like, it's fine to have questions, but the fact that that was like his main struggle in that movie just really bothers me and really gets under my skin. So I 10 times prefer the version in Superman 2025 where he knows he's going to be a superhero. He screams, people were going to die to Lois. He doesn't care what anyone thinks about him. He's going to save lives. And that's the Superman I like. And I think Man of Steel set us up for that in future movies. They just didn't follow through on it, which is really, really unfortunate. But I'll talk about my issues with Batman v Superman maybe another day, just not in this video. But of course, the bigger problem with Superman's characterization in this movie is the fact that he breaks his no-kill rule and he snaps Zod's neck, which I agree with. I think this is very out of character. I don't think this works for Superman. However, I'm not entirely against it. I like the way they set up the scene. Zod is going to kill this innocent family if Superman doesn't do anything. He's kind of backed up into a corner. But the other thing that I love about it is that guttural scream afterwards. Henry Cavill does such a good job just selling how horrible he feels about having to kill Zod in that moment. And I love that. And I think it could work really well if, again, this was setting up a trilogy of future movies. If this was his one and only death on his hands, then that works well for Superman because we could see how that affects him in future movies. Maybe that is the precipitating event that causes him to have his no-kill rule. He doesn't want to kill ever again if he can avoid it. And so characters like Lex Luthor, like other characters that we'll bring up down the line, they will taunt Superman and say, are you going to kill me? Are you going to snap my neck like Zod? They're going to throw it back in his face, and it will work really well to kind of juxtapose Superman. And I think that could be cool and really interesting. And so in that way, I think the neck snapping could have worked for future movies, even though it does go against Superman's character quite significantly, that we know and love. But again, this is an origin story, so I think it could have worked as a beginning point, right? As a starting point. Sort of like how Spider-Man lets the robber kill Uncle Ben. It's not a Spider-Man's character normally, but he lets it happen, right? I think it could kind of work that way. I'm not 100% sure, and it's still going to cause problems. It's still not my favorite thing, but it's okay. And again, that's why I think this interpretation of Man of Steel could have worked, if not be the definitive interpretation of Superman, right? Of course, the other big problem with Man of Steel is its plot holes, of which there are numerous, but the one I'll harp on right now is just the biggest one in my opinion, which is the fact that Zod gives Superman an ultimatum. Surrender to me in 24 hours or I'll start destroying the Earth, which is great, totally fine. But why does Superman not go to Jor-El? Like, why does he not ask his space dad, hey, how do I stop Zod? Right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Instead of he just goes and talks to some random priest. And this is made all the worse because Jor-El ends up having the master plan to take down Zod. He's like, throw this spaceship at that spaceship, sci-fi magic will happen, and you'll save the Earth. And it works. So it's like, if you'd just gone to your space dad when Zod gave you the ultimatum, you could have averted the rest of this movie. It's a big plot hole, but it doesn't hurt my enjoyment of the film. And that's ultimately what I love about Man of Steel, is that despite the major plot holes, despite him snapping Zod's neck, I still love this film. It still is a very compelling version of Superman. It's still cool to see Superman fly, super awesome. Still cool to see him be overpowered. And I love the S symbol. They did such a good job with this S symbol. I love Superman in the Man of Steel. It's just unfortunate that they didn't capitalize on this movie the way I think they should have. So, in short, I think Man of Steel is a really bad foundation for the DCEU, but I think it could have been a really good foundation for a Man of Steel trilogy. Let me break down what that trilogy could have looked like if you'll indulge me for a few minutes. So, with Man of Steel 2 and Man of Steel 3, I would stick very closely to the Superman mythos. I would stick only with his rogues gallery and maybe a few of his typical allies. I would not extend very much beyond the DC universe outside of that. Like, I would not go into Green Lanterns. I would not go into Batman or anything. This would just be Superman, and he's the only superhero of this world, which I think would work well. Again, it's very akin to the Dark Knight trilogy in that respect. And for Man of Steel 2 and 3, I'd kind of set up two villains to function as the bad and the ugly, where Superman's the good, right? Good, bad, and ugly, right? So in Man of Steel 2, I'd have Brainiac be the villain. It just makes all the sense in the world. You had this really cool prologue for Krypton, so let's do another prologue on Krypton. This time from Brainiac's perspective, we see that he's this artificial intelligence created by them who aided in the destruction of Krypton somehow. Doesn't really matter. But now he's come to Earth, he's chasing Kal-El, and he's causing problems. Doesn't really matter, right? So he'd be the big bad evil guy, but then the side villain who'd kind of be fall in the ugly category would be Lex Luthor. And I know it's kind of sad to put Lex Luthor off to the side, but I think introducing him kind of in a small way in Man of Steel 2 would set him up for future villainy in the third movie, which I will get to here in a second. And in true good, bad, and ugly fashion, I'd have Lex Luthor kind of be the deciding piece that tips the scales for the good and the bad, Superman and Brainiac, respectively. Lex Luthor would initially befriend Brainiac, and they would team up against Superman, but then when Lex Luthor realizes that Brainiac's going to destroy the Earth, he would betray Brainiac and help out Superman, only so far as to stop Brainiac. Of course, he still hates Superman to his core, and of course, this would leave kind of a problem of like, okay, why isn't he in jail or whatnot? But I think Lex Luthor's smart enough to kind of wiggle his way out, and there's not enough proof to convict him of actually having aided Brainiac or whatever. Doesn't really matter. The point is, Lex Luthor gets away. He's still at large for the third movie. So in the third movie, I'd have the good, bad, and ugly still, but this time Lex Luthor would be the bad, Superman's still the good, and the ugly character would be Metallo. And for those of you who don't know, Metallo is this kind of man-turned-robot who is powered by a kryptonite core, so he works really well as a Superman villain. And he had this happen to him because of Lex Luthor, but he equally blames Superman, so he kind of hates both. And I think it'd be a really fun villain to throw in the mix of all of this. So Metallo would be the villain that causes problems for Superman in the beginning and in the middle of the movie, but once Superman does eventually defeat him, he is, of course, faced by Lex Luthor, who is in his power suit. Yes, I would give Lex Luthor his power suit. It'd be so cool. I think the one change I'd do here is make it based off Kryptonian technology. That way it could put up a fight against Superman, right? Because my big problem with Man of Steel, or not problem, but my big concern with Man of Steel is that because Superman is so overpowered, how do you write good villains for him to go up against? Well, Brainiac would work because he's an android. It doesn't matter how many shells that Superman breaks up or destroys. Brainiac, the program, is going to survive in computers and databases and stuff. Plus, we saw Kryptonian technology cause problems for Superman in Man of Steel when he fought the World Engine in the Indian Ocean at the midway point of Man of Steel. So that works all really, really well. And then Metallo, because he's powered by kryptonite and he's a robot, he could, as long as we say that the robotic strength is strong enough to deal with Superman and take the punches, and it's like a super metal or material that can take the might of Superman, then that works, and he can be an effective villain against Superman. And then Lex Luthor, being just a normal mortal, again, if his power suit is powered by Kryptonian technology, maybe it reacts so fast that it's able to react in time against Superman's super speed, against his super strength, and it works there as well. So I think using Kryptonian technology as like the level set throughout, as well as a little bit of kryptonite here and there, could work to make Man of Steel's overpowered Superman face off against equally powerful supervillains. And as I mentioned earlier, I would have Zod's neck snap be the catalyst that forces Superman to never kill ever again, right? This will cause problems for him in Man of Steel 2 when he spares Lex Luthor's life, but it actually helps him in Man of Steel 3 when he spares Metallo's life, and Metallo ends up helping him more or less defeat Lex Luthor. And I think that could work really well for a trilogy of movies. It's a very rough outline, but I think it's really fun, and it just shows like the potential that Man of Steel could have had. So, in conclusion, I love Man of Steel. I love the overpowered Superman. I love his flying sequences. I love the prologue on Krypton. I love his characterization. I think it works really well for an origin story. And despite the fact that this movie has huge plot holes, I still am compelled by it. I still think it's such a fun superhero movie, and I still really like it. So even though I'm grateful that we have a reboot and that the DCU is now the main cinematic universe moving forward, which just opens up a world of possibilities for future storytelling, I will always love Man of Steel, despite that it got rebooted. So, love Man of Steel. I think it's a good movie despite its flaws, and I think it had a lot of potential, not as a foundation for the DCEU, but as a foundation for a Superman trilogy. It's just unfortunate that we never got that, and that Henry Cavill, the actor who played Superman, never got a chance at redemption to really show the true potential of his take on this character. But we can worry all day long about the past. I'm looking towards the future. I'm so excited for the future of Superman in the DCEU or the DCU. I'm so excited for Man of Tomorrow, which is going to function as a sequel to Superman 2025. May not be a direct sequel, but it will feature his character prominently, and that is very, very exciting. So here's to future exciting movies.